My name's John Stein. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and this morning I am announcing my decision on the Catalpa swine farrowing operation, a project proposed in Fillmore County. As I mentioned when I was in Mabel earlier this month, meeting with a number of the residents who attended the meeting, Fillmore County is a very sensitive geologic formation underlying all of the county, and there is a significant level of groundwater contamination that already exists. In light of that, I can't, in good conscience, allow this permit to move forward. Therefore, I'm denying the permit application for coverage under our general permit. And that means that the project will not proceed at the present time. Secondly, I'm going to recommend to the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board investigate and conduct further analysis of the region's groundwater contamination, looking at all potential sources of the high nitrate levels in groundwater in southeastern Minnesota. One way to do that would be to do a regional generic environmental impact statement, but that's not the only way to get that information out in front of people. It is important that we look comprehensively at the challenges that face our drinking water in Minnesota. As I mentioned, the level of contamination of private wells that exists in Fillmore County gives me motivation to not just do one more thing that could potentially harm that. Further, it's time to take a more comprehensive view and get on to identifying solutions to that contamination. I've communicated my decision today to the property owner and project sponsor, Mr. Al Hine. I've also conveyed information to others in the area that are in local government and the legislature. With that, I'll answer questions.
And before we start on the questions, I'm going to check again. Do we have any news media on the conference call?
Yeah, hi, this is Jeremy Olson with the Star Tribune. I heard nothing.
Okay, yeah.
Brad Williams at Midwest Family Broadcasting.
Okay.
Sorry, we had some difficulty with the conference call line, so we've got, we'll have video of the opening statement we can make available to you.
Okay.
Maybe we'll go directly to questions. Did anybody else just join the call?
Ann Emery.
Yeah. Steve Kravsky.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Ann. Thanks.
You want to give them the short summary?
So the short summary, this is Commissioner John Stein of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. The short summary of my opening statement was that the project Catalpa, the hog farrowing operation proposed for 5,000 animals in Fillmore County, I'm denying the permit application for coverage under our state feedlot general permit. That means that the project is not authorized to proceed. Because of that, there will not be a need for an environmental impact statement on the project. Secondly, I am recommending to the Environmental Quality Board that they further investigate all the sources of groundwater contamination throughout Fillmore County and the surrounding areas in the karst region of the state of Minnesota, which is basically 6 counties in southeastern Minnesota. The reason for these actions is because we have high nitrates in private water wells in the county, and I am interested in solving that issue for the longer term in the interest of public health. And so now that's a short statement, and maybe we'll take questions and start with someone on the phone.
Hi, Commissioner. This is Jeremy from the Star Tribune. Can you articulate the specific reasons that led to this decision? I mean, there were issues with sinkholes and geology and groundwater and all sorts of issues. What were the most compelling issues that made you decide to deny the permit?
Most compelling to me is the fact that the entire area, when we recently this year looked at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's inventory of private water well data that they had surveyed throughout the county, that found that 19 of the townships in the county had levels in their drinking water wells that exceeded the safe drinking water requirements or standard for nitrates in water wells, which is 10 milligrams per liter, 10 parts per million. That fact alone gave me great pause. We know that the sources of nitrate in drinking water come from our surface activities. Operations that could be failing septic tanks, could be old wells that are improperly constructed, as well as farming operations, application of commercial fertilizer and manure. Those things all combined result in groundwater contamination, and one of the reasons that I felt compelled to deny the permit application was that one more cut would not help that existing problem. So in the interest of public health, I denied the application.
Why not order an EIS?
The EIS that was anticipated for one project would not address the larger geographic problem of all the county and all of the contamination of groundwater, and I felt that it was more prudent and actually more effective to go to the EQB with a broader recommendation. Rather than study one project and learn all we can about one specific place, I think it's more beneficial to people of the county that are exposed to potential risk to do a broader study.
Could the EQB order an EIS?
The EQB, yes, the EQB could pursue a generic EIS, which would be scoped under the current rules. It provides for public input. There's a public process that is involved in defining what the boundaries and issues would be in a more generic environmental impact statement, but it's not the only thing that could be done. There could be other investigations or other data gathered that could also be helpful in analyzing the problem. But that's why it was necessary to not just look at one specific project. I felt like that was too limiting.
How often does the MPCA deny feedlot permits?
We do not typically deny feedlot permit applications. Normally the process, certainly under general permit application, general permits, they're most often applied for and covered under the general permit. There are thousands of feedlots across the state. This one is in a very sensitive area and did not make sense to me to allow to be covered under that general permit.
Is the door still open for Catalpa to go through with an individual permit application?
Yes, there is still the pathway for Catalpa to pursue an individual permit application. Individual permits are more customized and tailored to their land and operating practices, and more definitive requirements can be put upon individual permits. I don't know whether or not Mr. Hine will pursue that pathway, but that's an option for him to pursue.
Could this possibly send a signal to other people who want to start similar farms or set up businesses in Fillmore County to not make applications? Anything along that line?
Well, I certainly think that any future project proponent in the county is going to look carefully at the karst issues and at the potential for sinkholes and for rapid infiltration of contaminants into the groundwater. That's the basic problem that exists in these parts of our state, where water that falls on the surface of the land can enter the groundwater within a matter of minutes. And what we do at the surface of the land is of great concern, whether that's farming, whether that's building any kind of a facility that has concentrated runoff. Even building homes and septic systems can be a risk to groundwater contamination. So it is, in a way, I think, a wake-up call to all of us to do more to protect our own health. Anyone else on the phone have a question?
Commissioner Stein, this is Dana Burtness. I live fairly close to the proposed site. I'm a pastured hog farmer, and I just want to say this is a really disappointing decision for the literally hundreds of people who have showed up at every comment period and every public meeting, and we've been asking for an EIS. This feels like a dodge. They can still apply for an individual permit. We don't need any more information that would come from a permit application. We need a full environmental impact statement, and we needed that to be ordered. And this feels very disrespectful to me. This is a bad decision for family farmers. This is a bad decision for rural residents. We're really disappointed with this. And I feel like the PCA goes to folks. Sometimes it feels like folks at the PCA go to work in the morning and think of themselves as working for corporate ag interests. And I really hope that the PCA starts coming into work in the morning and thinking of people like me and people like my neighbors and people who already have contaminated wells. And we want you to start making decisions with us in mind, not corporate ag interests.
Sorry you feel that way. I know that the staff here are operating within the limits of the existing law and rules, and we do our best to protect the health and the environment within that system. The system that we have may not be the one that everyone values, but I can guarantee you it's not a guarantee that anyone gets to do anything that would harm the environment under this decision I'm making today. Our decision is aimed at protecting and restoring groundwater quality in Fillmore County and the broader area. Thanks.
Can you characterize the contamination, the groundwater contamination? You talked about nitrates. Existing manure from existing facilities getting into groundwater right now, or is it more nitrates?
Nitrates are, first of all, nitrates are part of manure, so they are available in the application of manure. So manure contains a number of nutrients as well as commercial fertilizer that is nitrogen aimed at providing for nutrients for crops. One of the things that we did in looking at the Department of Agriculture's data was ask ourselves, what do we already know? And when you look at the map of Fillmore County, there are significant levels of the wells that were tested ranging from over 30% of some of the wells tested in some townships that have levels above the Safe Drinking Water Act standard. And that's just telling me that everything that's happening at the surface of the ground is causing risk to the groundwater throughout Fillmore County. There are a couple areas where we had lower concentrations in Beaver Township and in the area around Rushford Village and Peterson and Rushford. So there are existing sources of contamination throughout the county. That was one of the things that really needs to be addressed. To focus on one specific project is not as important in my mind as laying a path for safe drinking water for the entire county.
This is Anna.
Commissioner, go ahead.
I have a question about the individual permit. What kind of a process is that?
The individual permit application is a separate process. There'll be public information and public meetings as a result of the application that anyone would make for that permit. It will be out on public notice is the process that we call it. So there'll be public meetings again. Specifically, we are required under that permit to address the specific sources of contamination risk to groundwater, and that's what our staff would work on, is trying to better identify areas of concern, soil types, features in the geology that would be at risk, and any kind of stormwater or manure, liquid manure storage basin concerns that would be addressed in that permitting process. So it'll be there'll be a new application, and there'll be a lot of the existing information would be used, but there may be additional information required for us to come to decision on that individual permit. And there will be public input through that public notice process.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Commissioner, Jeremy from the Star Tribune. We've been talking a lot about the broader area and multiple sources of groundwater contamination. Is it fair to hold this one project proposal up because of other sources of contamination? I mean, it's not the problem of this particular project, so why hold this one up to the problems of the broader county?
The challenge is that the coverage under the general permit would not be sufficient protection in my mind. That's why I say no to it. It needs more specific, intentionally designed features to protect the groundwater, and if those can be achieved, then it should be issued under an individual permit. If they can't, then an individual permit might not be granted for that facility. The reason is we now have a lot more data about groundwater contamination than we've had in the past. And once you know something, you should act on the basis of it, not say that one more cut after 1,000 is acceptable. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.